My name is Jason, and I used to think I was going to save the planet. You know the type, public school, eco club president, wore a recycled bottle hoodie for 2 years, yelled at people who didn't separate their trash. That was me. I used to collect rainwater in a secondhand fish tank just to water my tiny balcony garden. I thought every little thing counted. I still do, kind of. I went to school for environmental science. 4 years of soil reports, carbon math, and professors who wore trail shoes to class. I was going to work for a nonprofit, live out of a van if I had to, protest pipelines, get arrested for the right reasons. Instead, I spent most of last year organizing spreadsheets for a recycling firm that didn't even recycle half the time. They just sorted waste for someone else to throw away more efficiently. I quit after 8 months. Told myself it was temporary. Graduation was a blur. All my friends were talking about internships, fellowships, next steps. I was smiling for pictures and pretending I had a plan. I didn't expect anybody from my family to show up. Most of them were too far away or too old to travel. But just after they called my name and I walked across the stage, I saw her in the crowd. My grandmother, Miss Hazel. Purple church hat. Sunglasses, big smile like she'd been there the whole time. After the ceremony, we sat under a tree while people packed up around us. She handed me an envelope with $200 and told me I'd done well enough for now. Then she said, "Come learn the family business." I thought she meant real estate or insurance. Maybe one of those city jobs my cousins like to name drop when they wanted to sound like they were doing something respectable. I never really asked what Grandma did for work. Not properly. I had a vague memory of a corner shop from when I was little, the kind of place with sticky floors and too many smells competing for attention. Bread, bleach, beans, old sugar. I remembered getting scolded once for knocking over a jar of something that definitely wasn't meant for kids. There was always a line, too. People waited for canned goods, produce, bags of rice. Some of them looked tired. Some didn't quite look like people. That was Grandma's shop in Harlem. She called it Marva's Market and Goods, like it was just another mom-and-pop bodega on the block. But it wasn't. Turns out, she sells groceries to monsters. That part took me a while to understand. No one bothered to hide it from me, but no one bothered to explain it either. Grandma's never been big on explanations. She always figured if you were old enough to ask, you were old enough to see for yourself. The shop runs like any other place during the day. Collard greens in crates out front, coffee by the gallon behind the counter, a stack of lottery tickets next to the register. But once the sun goes down, something changes. A door opens in the back. An actual hidden door behind an old bookshelf. And the shop becomes something else entirely. That's the real business. Roots in jars, bones in paper, candles with handwritten labels. Herbs you don't find at bodegas unless you know how to ask. There's a back room that smells like smoke and salt and cinnamon, and every shelf feels like it's been there 100 years. Some of them probably have. Grandma's a witch. A real witch. Not the costume kind, or the weird Etsy people who sell self-branded tea. She's the kind that learned everything from her mother, who learned it from hers, and so on and so forth. Old Southern root work, passed down through hands and lots of stories by the stove. Grandma is who people go to when they need a problem solved the supernatural way. I grew up around it. Holidays spent sweeping the floor, wrapping bundles, writing labels, but I was never taught what anything meant. Grandma kept me just far enough outside the circle to stay safe. But now that I'm grown, she says it's time to learn. She says the shop's gonna be mine someday, and I need to know what I'm inheriting. So here I am, 6 months in, learning the ropes, watching my grandmother light candles and mix oils like it's no big deal, helping werewolves pick shampoo, ringing up ghost customers who leave payment in old coins that melt if you stare too long. It's a lot, but I'm starting to get the hang of it. Still, I'm getting ahead of myself. We can talk about all that later. There's more you should know about Grandma and the shop. More importantly, the shop's familiar, Salem. He's a gray cat with a bad attitude and a long memory. Nobody told me his full story, but people like to talk. And over time, I've heard enough to piece some of it together. The rumor is that he used to be a wizard. He was the arrogant, powerful type who thought rules didn't apply to him. At some point, he pissed off an all-powerful enchantress, and she turned him into a cat for the next 1,000 years. No one knows how long ago that was. When I asked Grandma once, she just said, "He's not halfway through yet." Salem doesn't like talking, but he'll get his point across some other way. He'll knock over jars if you forget to feed him. He'll disappear for hours when you need him most and show up later looking smug about it. He likes to sit on the highest shelf in the back room where the herbs are stored, just out of reach. Grandma named him Salem as a joke, which he clearly didn't find funny. I only found out later she was talking about the black cat from that old witch sitcom from the 90s. The shop itself is called Hazel's Marketing Goods. It sits on the corner of 137th and Malcolm X, right between a barber shop and a storefront church. Looks like any other Harlem bodega. Dusty produce crates out front, neon open sign in the windows, bell that rings when the door swings too wide. You can buy soap, cereal, canned vegetables, frozen waffles, paper towels, batteries, toothpaste, the usual stuff. But that's just during the day. After 8 p.m., we close the front and open the back. Not to the alley, but to a different part of the building. There's a bookshelf in the office. Grandma keeps her favorite book on it. An old, battered hard copy of Frankenstein on the spine. If you pull it out and turn it just right, the back panel opens and leads to a narrow hallway. At the end of that hallway is the night shop. That's where things change. The walls are lined with wooden shelves. The floor is stone. The ceiling hangs low and warm, and the air smells like cinnamon, smoke, and copper. Every jar is labeled, even the ones containing eyeballs. Every candle is handmade. There are roots wrapped in cloth, powders in sealed tins, bones tied with string, and bundles of herbs that don't grow anywhere I've ever studied. There are oils that shimmer like motor fluid, and little red flannel bags sewn shut with black thread. Grandma's shop serves Harlem's supernatural crowd, the ones that live tucked between the cracks. Old southern bloodlines that go back generations. Werewolves with tired eyes and careful manners. Witches from Louisiana with mud still under their nails. River spirits who drag muck all over the floor but still have the audacity to barter. Every so often, a boo hag comes through, looking for coffee beans and gluten-free bread. Sirens from the Hudson Valley pass through on their way south, always asking for salt and tobacco. You get the idea. Most of what I do involves stocking shelves and labeling jars. I wipe down the counter every night and restock the candles when we run low. When Grandma's knees don't hurt, she lets me help her brew things I can hardly stand the smell of. And through it all, Salem watches. I've been working here close to 6 months now, and trust me, I have stories that'll keep curious people like you up all night. So go on, pull up a chair. Pour yourself some of Grandma's famous carrot tea, if you can handle the kick. We have time. Let me tell you how it all started. My very first day in the shop. I remember it like it was yesterday. Grandma picked me up from the train station herself. I offered to grab a cab, but she said no one with sense paid money to get lost that deep in Harlem. And besides, she had errands to run. She pulled up in an old blue Buick that rumbled like it'd been hexed into staying alive. When I opened the door, there was a full sack of yams in the front seat. She told me to hold it on my lap and not ask questions. That was my first job, I guess. Yam security. We rode in silence for a while. Then she asked if I was hungry. I said I'd eaten on the train, which was true, but it didn't stop her from handing me a brown paper bag with 2 hot rolls and a square of cornbread wrapped in foil. I didn't say no. You don't turn down Grandma's food. Not if you know what's good for you. When we got to the corner of 137th and Malcolm X, she pulled into a spot like it belonged to her. Probably did. The shop looked just like I remembered from when I was a kid. Narrow red awning, windows taped with paper signs, old handwritten hours. 2 milk crates were holding up a display of overripe tomatoes. Well, this is it. Hazel's Market. Been mine since before you had teeth, she said. Inside, it smelled like floor wax and black paper. The place was tight, with rows of narrow shelves packed full of groceries. Most of it was regular stuff: bread, rice, cereal, cleaning supplies, canned goods. A few shelves leaned to one side, but none had fallen yet. A little bell jingled when we came in, and the air felt warmer somehow. She gave me a tour like it was any old job. First, the basics. Register in the front, broom in the back, break table next to the ice machine, even though she didn't like people sitting down on the clock. I was to keep the shelves neat, sweep before closing, and never move the jar by the window. When I asked why, she just said, "It's got a job to do, same as you." Then she walked me to the back row and pointed to the last shelf on the left. Looked normal, stacked with paper towels and bags of rice. "This one's not like the others. She's called Helen. If you treat her right, she'll restock herself," Grandma said, tapping the side of the shelf with the back of her hand. I stared at her. "You named your shelf." "She named herself. Now go on, be polite." I looked at the shelf, then back at Grandma. She didn't blink. So I sighed, leaned in a little, and said, "You're looking real solid today, Helen. Straight lines, good wood grain. I'm real proud of you." A box of rice slid into place on the bottom row, like it'd been there the whole time. I rubbed my eyes, like I was seeing things but didn't say anything else. Grandma just gave me that little smug smile of hers that her and Dad have in common before turning down the next aisle. Next, she brought me into the office. The desk was stacked with loose papers, a cash box, and 3 ceramic frogs that stared straight ahead like they were listening. On the far wall stood an old bookshelf, packed with cookbooks, gardening guides, and what looked like one very out-of-place sci-fi novel. It took me a second to realize that it was a battered edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. She walked straight up to it and pulled it off the top shelf. The whole bookshelf slid open like a door. "Come on, let me show you the rest," she said. I followed her into a hallway just wide enough for one person at a time. It opened up into a room that didn't make sense size-wise. From the outside, this should have been a closet, but the inside went deep. Long shelves, stone walls, soft light from glass lanterns hanging overhead. It looked more like a root cellar than part of a Harlem bodega. "This is where the work happens. During the day, we feed people. At night, we help them with something a little more special," she said. I stood there for a second, just trying to take it all in. There were labeled jars, cloth-wrapped bundles, candles, and tiny bags pinned up like museum pieces. The whole place smelled like cinnamon and dried herbs. Not the kind you find in plastic shakers, either. Real ones, picked by hand. I don't expect you to understand all this right away. Your daddy never took to it. Black thumb, that one. Good man, but magic slid off him like rain off a slick coat. But you might have something. That blood didn't skip every generation, she said, as she looked me over. I told her I wasn't looking to become a root worker. I was just here to help her out, run errands whenever she needed. She smiled, like that was enough for now. Good, well, we'll see where it goes, she said. And that's when I met Salem. He walked in from the hallway, like he owned the place. Sleek gray fur, high tail, eyes half closed like he was already tired of me. I bent down to greet him, and got one sharp swipe across the toe of my sneaker. No claws, just a warning. Grandma looked over. Oh, that means he likes you. He doesn't bother with people he don't plan on seeing again. I didn't really believe her. I kept my distance just the same. The rest of the night moved quick. A werewolf came in first, still half buttoned into a work shirt, asking if we had any more of the cedar and clove shampoo. Said his usual spot ran out, and the store brand stuff made his coat dull. Grandma handed him a dark bottle from a shelf I hadn't noticed before. No label on it, just a wax seal and a faint pine scent. He paid in exact change and promised to send his cousin by next week. Not long after, a vampire walked in wearing sunglasses and a wool coat like it was still winter. He asked if his order was ready. 2 jars of blood replacement, one warm, one cold. Grandma brought them out from under the counter and placed them gently in a padded box. He nodded his thanks, slipped her a folded bill, and left without a word. Later, a fellow witch stopped by. She and Grandma hugged like old neighbors and caught up in short, quiet phrases. She handed over a neat bundle of cinnamon sticks tied with blue thread. In return, Grandma gave her a small, cloudy jar filled with what looked like pickled eyeballs. Some open, some not. Neither of them blinked. They just traded, nodded, and the woman walked out humming to herself. I stood off to the side, trying not to stare. Grandma didn't explain a single thing. She just moved through it all like this was the most natural job in the world. I didn't understand half of what I saw, but I knew enough to stay out of the way and keep the counter clean. By the time we closed up, I realized I hadn't looked at my phone once. Wasn't what I expected. Wasn't anything like what I'd pictured. But I went to bed that night thinking maybe I'd stumbled onto something better. Maybe it was something I could get good at. Even if the cat hated me. I was sure Salem would warm up to me eventually. Maybe. Getting used to the routine of running the shop came easy, but I couldn't shake something off my mind. Like, why'd she take so long to come get me and explain it all? Grandma didn't bring it up right away. Weeks passed before she sat me down in the conjure room. It was late. The store was closed, the front lights off, and the back room smelled like cinnamon, bay leaf, and something warm I couldn't name. She had a kettle on, and the air carried steam from carrot tea and the soft sound of jars clinking when she moved things around. That night, she pulled up a stool, handed me a mug, and said it was time I learned about root work. Real root work. This isn't wizard magic, she began. This ain't no fireball in one hand and lightning in the other. No arson. Got it, I said. She smacked me for that. She went on. She said root work, hoodoo, conjure, call it what you like, was magic for the people. It was born out of necessity and survival through the darkest times. It's everyday magic, household magic, dust and bones to create tonics to heal the sick, salt laid in the corners to keep out the ghouls, red brick ground up under the window frame, things to keep you safe, to keep your people safe. That's what this is. She moved around the room as she talked. Her hands passed over jars filled with powders and oils, and eyeballs that moved. She pointed out the difference between hot devil's powder and bone dust, showed me where she kept the graveyard dirt, let me smell 2 different jars of pixie dust, and asked which one felt stronger. I didn't know how to answer, but she said my guess was right anyway. This kind of work helped folks through the worst of times, the kind of poor where there's no soup left in the pot, the kind of sickness where there's no doctor coming. We made do with what we had, and we kept each other whole, she said, as she passed me a jar labeled frog toes. She said her own mother taught her, back when they lived in the Low Country, before they moved north. Said every woman in the line carried some piece of the knowledge, even if they didn't want it, even if it scared them. Grandma wasn't afraid. She learned everything she could. I tried to teach your daddy once. He didn't take to it. Not that he wasn't smart, he just didn't have the right hands for it, she said. I leaned forward, turning the mug in my hands. Why didn't she ever teach me any of this growing up? Not even a little? Because it wasn't my call. Your daddy asked me not to. Said he wanted to raise you clean. Said you'd already been through enough losing your mama, and he didn't want you getting caught up. And I honored it, even though it hurt me. I kept you out of the shop. I thought maybe one day he'd change his mind. My brow furrowed. Dad asked you not to. Your daddy loved your mama something fierce. When she passed, something in him folded up, like he couldn't unbend no matter how long I waited. He meant well, Sonny, but he was grieving for a long time. And grief, well, it makes people turn away from what used to give them comfort, she explained. I looked at the table between us. There was a bowl of roots soaking in water. Their edges had gone soft. The water smelled like soil and iron. But you're here now, and we've got time to catch up. You may not have come up with it, but that don't mean it can't live in you, she said with a smile. I smiled back. She stood again, moved toward a small box on the shelf, and brought out a folded cloth with something wrapped inside. When she opened it, I saw a small bundle tied with string, filled with what looked like dirt, bone, and dried herbs. This is a starter hand for protection. Don't ask it for anything fancy now, just carry it. Keep it close. You'll know when you need it. I took it without asking questions. The cloth felt warm, like it'd been sitting in the sun, even though the room was cool. You don't have to be a root worker, she began, but you need to understand where you come from. This isn't just magic. This is blood and legacy. Your dad knew it. I know it. You ought to know it too. The room was quiet for a while after that, and the smell of steeped roots and the sound of the kettle boiling filled the room. For the first time, I understood why my dad kept me away. Grandma had given me space to come back on my own terms. And somehow, without even meaning to, I had. I didn't know what all this would mean yet, what I was supposed to do with root magic or legacy or any of it. But I didn't feel lost. At least not there in that room with Grandma. It felt like the ground had finally settled under me. And for someone like me, it was a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Grandma's lesson stayed with me for the next few days. I kept the little protection bundle she gave me in the inner pocket of my jacket and found myself checking it without thinking. It didn't glow or pulse or do anything special. It just sat there with a sort of weight. It was comforting. The place fell back into its usual rhythm after that. Regulars came and went. The front stayed calm, the back stayed busy, and Grandma drifted in and out like someone who operated on a schedule only she understood. She said she had to commune with the spirits, and the way she said it made it clear she didn't expect me to ask follow-up questions. She packed a thermos, a bag of dried herbs, and one of her heavier shawls, and then she slipped out the back door. Sometimes she was gone for hours, sometimes days. This time it was the latter. The third morning she still hadn't returned, and I was halfway through sorting a crate of plantains when someone stepped into the shop who looked, for lack of a better word, like shit. The man introduced himself as Luther. He was tall and broad, his clothes were worn, and his jeans scuffed and frayed at the edges. He stood near the counter with both hands tucked into his jacket pockets, like he was trying not to touch anything, till he was sure he was allowed. His eyes kept drifting toward the back hallway, as if he expected Grandma to appear any minute. When I told him she wasn't here, and that I couldn't be sure when she'd be back, something in him tightened. He shifted his weight and looked around the store again, as though trying to decide whether he should stay or leave. He stayed. He explained why he'd come. He said he worked at a construction site on the far side of Harlem and had taken a cheap apartment nearby to save money on subway fare. He didn't try to sell it as anything more than it was. A bad building in a rough area with a rent price low enough to raise suspicion. He said he'd taken it anyway because the commute had been wearing him down, and he wanted a place close enough to walk. The trouble started after he moved in. Small things at first. Things a tired man might overlook, but they grew. The first issue was the smell. He said the apartment smelled like blood on Wednesdays only. No other day. No matter how much he scrubbed, no matter how often he aired the place out. It sat under the walls and floors like something no one had properly cleaned up. And then all the light bulbs broke. Not at once, one at a time, until the entire apartment went dark. He replaced them, but they kept breaking, and now he lived by candlelight. The last problem was the one he couldn't ignore. He said he'd been waking up with dirt on his chest every morning, and not just a little, enough to coat his sheets. Enough to leave a trail on the floor when he stood up. His nails were cracked and packed with soil he didn't remember touching. Some mornings he found dried blood at the edges of his cuticles, as if he'd clawed at something rough for hours. His shoes were scuffed to the leather. His jeans had dirt ground deep into the seams. He tried to explain it away at first. Maybe he'd scratched the floor in his sleep. Maybe the dirt tracked in from the hallway. What finally broke him was the news. A string of graves had been disturbed at a cemetery a few blocks from his building. Not vandalized, opened, dug up with bare hands and no footprints around him. The evening broadcast showed photos of the damaged plots, and he felt sick to his stomach. He woke up the next day with blood under his nails again, and felt exhausted down to the bone, like he'd worked a full shift in his sleep. He didn't know what any of it meant, but he knew it wasn't right. And when he told this story at the bar where he stopped after work, the bartender told him to go talk to the witch. That was how he ended up standing in front of me, waiting for someone to tell him whether he was imagining things, or if something was genuinely wrong with him or his home. I stood behind the counter, tried to decide what I was supposed to do. Grandma wasn't here. She hadn't given me instructions for situations like this. But Luther kept standing there with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders drawn tight, like a man holding his breath. And after a few moments, it felt like the only answer was the simple one. I told him I could come take a look. I went to the back room and packed a small tote bag with the items Grandma always used for simple protection cases. A candle, a bag of salt, a charm made from dried herbs and thread. A small jar of cleansing mix she kept pre-made on the highest shelf. I didn't know whether any of it would help, but I recognized them from watching her work, and they made sense to bring. When I set the bag on the floor to add a few more items, Salem climbed inside without hesitation. He circled once and settled himself in like this was a routine he'd been waiting for. He didn't look at me for permission. He never did. I figured if the shop familiar wanted to come along, might be better to let him. I checked the tote once more, adjusted the strap, and told Luther I was ready. He nodded. He didn't seem reassured, but he didn't seem alone anymore either. Sometimes that's the best someone can ask for. We stepped out onto the sidewalk with the tote over my shoulder, Salem's ears just barely visible from inside the bag, and the evening settling in across Harlem like another layer of the city waking up. I locked the front door, checked it twice, and reminded myself that this was part of the job now. Root workers made house calls. Witches did too. And if I was going to help Grandma run this place one day, I needed to learn how to walk into trouble instead of around it. I didn't know what we would find in Luther's apartment, but I sent a quick prayer to whoever was listening, knowing we'd need all the help we could get. Luther led the way through a few side streets until we reached his building. The entrance had peeling paint and a broken buzzer. The hallways were narrow and dim, and the whole place smelled like boiled cabbage the moment we stepped in. It wasn't subtle. The scent clung to the walls and floors and floated down the hallway in a steady wave. Made my stomach turn, but I tried to keep a straight face as we climbed up to the 3rd floor. I learned enough from Grandma to know that smells mattered. Certain ones showed up in old magic, especially the kind used to hide work someone didn't want found. Boiled cabbage was common in Eastern European folklore. It was used to mask the presence of a spell. I'd read that in one of Grandma's books the week before, and now it clicked in a way that felt too on the nose to ignore. Luther unlocked the door to his apartment, and the smell got worse. Salem jumped out of the tote bag as soon as we stepped inside and began walking the perimeter. The apartment itself was small. 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen, and a living room with a sagging couch. The floorboards were worn down in patches. A candle sat on every flat surface. Luther hadn't exaggerated. Every light bulb really was gone. I walked through the rooms and tried not to think about how unqualified I felt. I wasn't Grandma. I didn't have decades of practice. I only had what she'd shown me and what I remembered from watching her work. Still, I was here now, and Luther was watching me with a look that expected something useful. I started with the basics. I checked the corners of the rooms for unusual powders or markings. I checked the door frame for symbols or scratches. I checked under the mattress for anything that didn't belong. The candlelight made it easy to see the small things. A few piles of dirt on the sheets confirmed what Luther had said. His shoes by the doors were still covered in mud. His jacket sleeves were frayed, like he'd been digging through rough ground. Salem circled the living room twice before pausing near the kitchen. His ears flicked once. His tail twitched. Then he walked toward the refrigerator and sat down in front of it, like he'd found what we were looking for. I took that as my cue. I moved into the kitchen and pulled the refrigerator forward. It scraped across the floor with a long grinding sound. Behind it, the wall didn't sit flush. There was a narrow panel with a small gap at the bottom, just wide enough for a hand to slip through. The boiled cabbage smell was coming from there, stronger than anywhere else. When I pulled the panel free, a small crawl space revealed itself. Big enough for a few objects, not big enough for a person. Salem backed up, his fur raised slightly. Inside the crawl space was a bundle wrapped in cloth. The fabric was stained and tied with something that looked like old twine. I didn't touch it right away. Instead, I studied it the way Grandma always did when someone brought her something strange. The cloth looked handmade. The twine wasn't twine at all, but horsehair, braided tightly. The smell of boiled cabbage came from inside that bundle. It was a concealment trick. Someone had placed this here intentionally. It wasn't an accident, and it didn't belong to Luther. I took the bundle out and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I untied it carefully. Inside were bone fragments, herbs I didn't recognize, a stone covered in red dust, and a piece of cloth that looked like it'd been torn from someone's clothing, all wrapped together in a way that spoke of a deliberate hand. It was a voodoo artifact. Old, tense, the kind used to direct fear or sickness towards someone without even touching them. Grandma kept items like this locked away at the back of the conjure room. She said they were nothing to play with. I unpacked the tote bag and set out the items I'd brought. The candle for clearing, the salt for boundaries, the protection charm for the room, the jar of cleansing mix for the corners. I worked slowly, the same way I'd seen Grandma do it. Salt across the threshold first, then the corners, then the windowsills, then the candle in the center of the living room. I lit it and watched the flame catch. I repeated the process through every room, making sure the salt line stayed unbroken. Salem inspected every spot after I finished it, which I took as approval. When the work was done, the apartment felt different. Not lighter exactly, but calmer. The boiled cabbage smell didn't vanish, but it faded enough to make the place feel like a real home instead of something under a spell. Luther thanked me. There was something in the change of his expression that caught my eye. It looked like he believed he'd finally be able to sleep. Grandma returned to the shop 3 days later. She listened to everything I told her about the apartment and the crawl space. She examined the bundle I'd wrapped up and brought back. She didn't touch it with her bare hands. She said Luther must have upset someone connected to old magic. Maybe an ex-wife with the wrong kind of ties. Maybe a boss with family roots he didn't talk about. Someone with access to his place and a grudge deep enough to do this kind of thing. They planted the artifact, and the apartment did the rest. She called it a boneyard curse, an old spell meant to drive a person toward the grave one night at a time. Left alone long enough, it would have pulled Luther toward the place he kept waking up covered in dirt from. A person doesn't survive that kind of end. They go willingly, because the curse tells them to. If I hadn't made the house call, Grandma said he would have buried himself alive within weeks. But Luther was safe now. The curse was broken. The apartment was clean. Whoever had planted the artifact hadn't shown themselves, and that part of the mystery would remain unsolved to this day. Things settled down after the Luther case, at least by Harlem standards. The shop kept its usual rhythm, and Grandma slipped back into her routines like she'd never been gone. I kept helping customers, stocking shelves, learning names, and figuring out which jars I wasn't supposed to touch unless she told me to. The familiar regulars still stopped by, Betty with her bags of gossip and clumsy elbows, Jack with his cigarette smoke and soft voice, and the rest of the neighborhood's supernatural crowd who treated the shop like a second home. I stayed. Wasn't a decision I made all at once. Just happened in the way slow decisions do. The kind you realize only after they've already become true. Some mornings, I would catch sight of my degree hanging on the back wall of my room and feel that itch, like I should be doing something more official, more, career-shaped. But that itch got smaller every day. Harlem had its own kind of work waiting for me. Real work. Work that people needed. Grandma still called most of the shots, but every now and then she gave me a job that carried more weight. A cleansing, a blessing, a reading. Nothing big, nothing too dangerous, but enough to show she trusted me to take steps in the same direction she'd walked her whole life. I didn't call myself a root worker, and she didn't call me one either. She said the title wasn't important. The responsibility was. I could see myself staying here for a long time, maybe longer than I expected. There's something about this neighborhood that keeps you in place, not trapped exactly, and just anchored. And once you start paying attention, you realize how many stories sit under the sidewalks and fire escapes. Monsters buying groceries, witches trading recipes, spirits trying to pay off old debts. It's a strange corner of the world, but it feels honest in a way my old life never did. So that's all I've got for now. Those are the stories I can tell without Grandma fussing at me for sharing too much. If you've listened this far, well, thank you. I'll have more eventually. Harlem always provides. Oh, and if you ever need anything, bread, beans, coffee, or maybe a solution to a problem you can't say out loud to anyone else, you know where to find us. Until then, be careful out there.
Hey, huge thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you enjoyed the story, and have a good night.